Are you thinking of using mediation in your divorce? If you are, I've got some divorce mediation tips that I think you can use. Hi, I'm Karen Covey. I'm a divorce coach, lawyer, mediator, arbitrator, and a collaborative divorce professional. And in today's video, we're going to talk about divorce mediation, specifically what it is, a little bit about how it works, and after we talk about that, I'm going to give you a few divorce mediation tips that you can use in your own divorce. But before we get to the divorce mediation tips, we've got to talk about what divorce mediation is. And simply put, divorce mediation is a way that you and your spouse can get together with a mediator who is a neutral, independent third party whose job is to help you facilitate an agreement on all the issues in your divorce. So the divorce mediation process is a tool that you can use to settle all your divorce issues outside of the court system. Now, in order for this to work, you need, number one, a divorce mediator, and that mediator must be, first and foremost, a trained professional, because mediation is a skill set, and you need somebody who knows what they're doing so that you have the best chance of actually reaching an agreement and making this time productive. Number two, mediator needs to be probably trained as a divorce professional, trained definitely in divorce. So what does that mean? It means they're going to be a lawyer, they're going to be a therapist, or they're going to be a certified divorce financial planner. So they're going to have expertise in some area of divorce. They're going to have expertise in mediation. And number three, probably the most important thing is they're going to be independent. They're going to be neutral. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you have talked to a divorce lawyer, consulted with a divorce lawyer, gotten advice from a divorce lawyer who also happens to be a mediator, you can't ask that lawyer to then be your mediator because they're not neutral anymore. They've talked to you, they've given you advice. The same thing is true for your spouse. And the same thing is true whether you're talking about a lawyer or a therapist. If you or your spouse has seen a therapist individually, you can't ask that therapist to be a neutral mediator because they're not neutral anymore. So you get the idea. So you start out with this mediator, and then that mediator helps you and your spouse reach an agreement. Well, how does that work? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on a lot of things, but what you need to realize, and most people don't realize, is that mediation is not this one thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all and it always works the same way in every case. That's not true. There are a lot of different kinds of mediation. For example, there's regular mediation, what I call regular mediation, which is you and your spouse sitting at a table with the mediator who's trying to broker a deal between the two of you. That's one kind of mediation. Then there's lawyer-assisted mediation, which is you and your lawyer, your spouse and your spouse's lawyer, and the mediator sitting around a table trying to negotiate a settlement of all of your divorce issues. Then there's something called shuttle mediation, which is you and your lawyer in one room, your spouse and your spouse's lawyer in another room, and the mediator going back and forth, shuttling between the rooms, trying to help you reach a deal. Now, before we go further, I probably should say these days a lot of mediation, probably most mediation, is taking place virtually. So when I say room, it could be a Zoom room or it could be a physical room. It doesn't make much difference. But the idea is in shuttle mediation, the mediator is going back and forth and you're staying in the same place and you're not in the same room with your spouse. That's one kind of mediation. Another kind of mediation is court-ordered mediation. That happens when the judge looks at you and your spouse and says, you two are going to go to mediation and try to work this out on your own. And if you can't work it out, then you can come back and ask me for a decision. But until you try to deal with this yourself, I'm not going to make that decision for you. So that's court-ordered mediation. And court-ordered can be, in a lot of different ways. It could be the shuttle mediation or just without the lawyers. Either way, but that's what court-ordered mediation means. Then there's mediation that's done in chunks. So you might have a 2-hour block and you're going to cover certain issues in that 2 hours and then other issues in another 2-hour block. So you do it over the course of time, over a series of days. Or you could have mediation where you start first thing in the morning and you go until everything is settled or the day is over, like 8 or 10 or 12 hours later. Now, there's different reasons for using all these different kinds of mediation, and sometimes the truth is you don't have a choice. I mean, if the judge says to you, you're going to mediation, then you're going to mediation, and you don't really have a whole lot of say in it. May or may not work, but you at least have to go, right? So you may not have a choice too, because in your area, mediators may be used to doing things one certain way, and that's all you can find. And that's okay. It doesn't matter so much what kind of mediation you're going to do as it does that you know what kind of mediation you're going into and you know what the rules of that mediation are. And that's your divorce mediation tip number 1, is to know the rules and know what you're dealing with and know what the process is going to be. Now, if you don't know that information, you can ask the mediator or you can ask your lawyer if you have a lawyer. But you have to know going in what kind of mediation you're likely to face so that you know what to expect. And why is that important? Well, first of all, knowing what to expect is going to reduce your anxiety level by a lot. You're always going to be nervous going in, but if you don't even know what's happening or how it works, you're going to be so nervous, you're going to be way less likely to be able to negotiate intelligently with or without a lawyer. So you've got to understand what the process is, and that will help you bring your stress level down. And it's also going to make you more effective at negotiating, because the strategies and tactics that you might use in a negotiation that's happening in a 2-hour block can be very, very different than the one that's going on all day until you reach an agreement. So you've got to know what the rules are before you can actually walk in the door, and if you want to mediate effectively. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to be prepared. And part of being prepared means to know the rules, but it means so much more than that. It means, for example, knowing the facts, knowing your finances, knowing what your numbers are. How much money do you have? How much money do you owe? How much money do you make? What does your spouse make? You've got to know all of those things before you walk into the room. Otherwise, you don't know what to negotiate. You've also got to know what you're likely to get or not get if you went to court, if you went to trial. And it's not that you're going to go to trial, but when you know this is the best I could do or this is the worst I can do, then you have the parameters in which you can set your sights, set your goals, and negotiate. You know that you've got to go from here to there. And if what your spouse is offering you is worse than the worst you can do in court, then maybe you don't want to settle. Or if it's better than the best you can do in court, then maybe you do want to settle. But you have to know these things. So you have to be prepared. You have to do your homework before you walk into the mediation session. And the mistake that I see so many people making is just walking in, not understanding how it works, what's going on. They just walk in blind, and then they don't tend to do so well. Either they don't make an agreement, or worse yet, they make an agreement that like 6 months later they're thinking to themselves, what was I thinking? And they're kicking themselves for making an agreement that didn't turn out to be in their best interest because they didn't prepare. So step number 1 is to know the rules of the mediation, know how it's going to work. Step number 2 is to be prepared. And step number 3, divorce mediation tip number 3, is to be flexible. And here's what I mean. If you have an idea of what you want and you say, I need these 3 things. I have to have these 3 things, or these 10 things, or these 20 things, or I'm not going to settle. You're going to have a really hard time negotiating. You just don't have any room to move. But if instead of approaching your mediation by saying, I want this, you say to yourself, okay, here's what I need. Here are the things that are really important to me. Here's what I really care the most about that I have to have. Here's the stuff that I don't care so much about. It really doesn't. It'd be nice to have it, but if I don't have it, I don't care. And here are the things that I need. If I get, for example, X amount of dollars from my spouse for support, I can pay my bills. So I know this is my number. And whether that's, how I get to that number doesn't matter so much as long as I get to that number every month. And maybe if I have X amount of I'm going to get X amount of dollars from the marital estate, so this much property, and I'm only going to take this much debt, then I know I can make it. Then I know that that feels fair to me, and so I'm willing to settle it. Now, whether the pieces that go into making up that settlement are the house or the retirement or the savings account, or what the pieces are aren't as important as what the end result is. So when I say be willing to be flexible, it means that you don't walk in like so rigid and structured on I must have this, but to know what is it I need? What is it I want? What would I like to have, and what am I willing to give up? Because if you're not willing to give up anything, you're not going to reach a deal. And you may think, okay, well then that's fine, then mediation didn't work. Well, yeah, but then you just have a colossal waste of time and money, and more importantly, a missed opportunity. Because here's the reality. Most cases are going to settle. Like, when I say most, I mean like 90% of better of divorce cases are going to settle. The question is, when are you going to settle, and how are you going to settle? Are you going to settle by mediating your divorce and you make a settlement early on, and you get your divorce put behind you relatively easily, because it's never easy, but relatively easily? Or do you blow your mediation and end up settling on the courthouse steps after you've paid another $10 or $20 or $30,000 or more to your lawyer and taken another year of your life tied up in the divorce drama? Which is it going to be? So if it's at all possible, you don't want to waste your mediation. And that means that you need to follow the tips that, these 3 tips. Number 1, know what you're dealing with, know the process, know what the rules of the mediation are. Number 2, be prepared, know your facts, know your figures, know what you want, have a negotiation strategy. And number 3, be willing to be flexible and know which ways you're willing to be flexible in and which ways you're not willing to be flexible in. Because just because you're going to mediation doesn't mean you have to be a doormat, right? It means you need to know your boundaries, know your top, this is the best that I can do, this is the worst that I can do, this is what I want, and this is my, what I have to have or I'm not willing to settle. Know all of those things, and you'll give yourself a much better chance of making your divorce mediation successful. So I hope you found these tips helpful. If you have, then I need you to do 2 things for me. Number 1, like this video, and number 2, subscribe. Below the video, hit the subscribe button, and there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1, if you subscribe, you will get notified right away every time I release a video, so you will have all the divorce information that you need as soon as it comes out. And that's important. And number 2, the more people who subscribe to this channel, the more YouTube is going to show these videos, and the more people will have access to this information so that they can get the help they need in their divorce. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Bye for now.